Super excited to talk to you, my brother in crime. The whole reason why I started this podcast is I wanted to show people that you don't have to be in the life science industry to have an illustrious career in it. Now, in your case, though, you've been in the life science industry for many, many years, over 20 years, and you even did a degree at the University of Minnesota in sciences, in biochemistry and molecular biology in particular. So you've been in it for a while, and we'll get into your career. But even though you have sort of a straightforward path, there's still some really interesting twists and turns and challenges, like life goes, right? But my initial question to you is, what got you into being interested in sciences in university to begin with?
Thanks for having me, by the way. As far as illustrious career, I don't know about that, but we'll get into that. I wanted to be a doctor from when I was a little kid. So that was kind of my path. And kind of person I am is, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to do. I either wanted to be a doctor or a hockey player. And my dad said, study harder, because you're not probably going to be a pro hockey player. I was always interested in science, all the sciences really. And it really started with the stars, astronomy, those sort of things when I was a kid, just looking up in space and just sort of being awed at that and wondering, where do we come from, that sort of thing. But yeah, I just always really wanted to be a doctor, so that was my path. Did really well in high school. I went to University of Minnesota Duluth, and the path to becoming a doctor was, a good one, was biochemistry, molecular biology, and psychology. So that was my path. I certainly learned throughout college. You get burned out. If anyone's had that degree path, it's a lot, and it's a lot early. You really have to be focused. And really, right around my junior year, I was like, I can't go to school for another 4 to 8 years, at least not right now. And so what do you do with your degree? I definitely wanted to finish my degree. There was a lot of doors that could open. And, that's kind of where I went, is into the industry.
Gotcha. And did you, like a lot of people, have to find yourself and backpack across Europe first before finding a job in the industry, or you just went right in?
I went right in. I was pretty young in terms of meeting someone, getting married, had a kid on the way, that sort of stuff. So I didn't really have time to, hey, I'm going to just do this on my own. I was a early family man right after college. So I jumped right from the University of Minnesota Duluth, our former company, Bio-Techne, which at that time was known as R&D Systems. And I just remember asking my dad, what am I going to do? I know I can get a lab job and those sorts of things. And he's like, well, you just have to jump right into it. And, I had gone on a few interviews. I interviewed even for a pharmaceutical sales job right out of college, which I just didn't like the vibe really of at least the person that was interviewing me. And I probably could have made more money, but I really didn't have any offers. And Bio-Techne came calling and made me my first offer. And I remember throughout college, I was promised biochemistry degree. You're going to make $60,000 coming out of college. And anybody that's young listening to this now, that's not a lot of money, but it was in 1999 when I graduated. That was a solid job, 60, 70,000. And my first offer from Bio-Techne was 27,000. And that was in the QC lab, antibody QC, protein QC, immunoassay QC. And my dad just said, you got to take it. You got to start somewhere, and this is your way in. So that's what I did.
Lots of learning there, because your career, you literally went from the lab to the boardroom and everything in between. Being in sales, I think, so you started in the lab, and obviously you moved to sales, and we could talk about that, but that experience in the lab, I'm sure, helped you big time when you're in front of customers talking about applications and whatnot, right?
Yeah, definitely. Your degree only goes so far. So everybody is about practical application to what they're doing. And if you can understand that, then you can meet their needs. So getting into industry, understanding even from a lab level, what makes things tick from a business standpoint. Why are we manufacturing this antibody? I always ask questions like, why is this one important? Well, it's going to sell a lot because of this, or this is a big marker in terms of cancer research or HIV research. Even though I was in QC primarily, and then also assay development, even though the job is somewhat mundane, day to day is pretty much the same. You knew that the products that you were kicking out really had impact, not only on the company from that standpoint, but also the market itself and research. So I did take pride on it. It just didn't pay quite enough.
Start
But I tell
somewhere.
my kids, I have a 23-year-old and a 17-year-old, both daughters, and Everybody has high expectations and dreams. And in order to hit those marks in your life, you have to start somewhere. So if that door is cracked open just a little bit, you just have to jump right in.
The fact that you did start in the lab made you an even more successful sales rep because of what we just talked about. And that's what I would advise. I think anyone that has a more straightforward path is set in the life science industry knows early on that this is where they want to be at. I'd highly recommend working in a lab, even if it's just a 4-month gig during the summer as a co-op thing or a co-op program university. It's a real good school because that's where you learn all the applications, Western blot, tissue culture, flow cytometry, all that to take further later on in your career. You never know where it goes.
Yeah, and for that matter, it teaches you, most importantly, the applications. You can learn the applications in a book, right? But you learn the pain points. You actually see why lab people are why, from a sales standpoint, they're like, I'm busy, I'm setting up this experiment, I can't meet at this time, or I'm sorry, I don't fit right into your schedule from a business standpoint, but I have this, and this going on. And again, it teaches you the pain points, and really sales is about healing those pain points. If you can do that for a customer, understand the issues that they face on a daily basis because you've been there, you can definitely be much more effective in business.
A lot of people make this transition, but you went from the lab to, did you do tech support beforehand or no, you went straight into sales?
No, I went to sales. So I was in the lab for about 3 years, just over 3 years. And I really didn't want to do that for my entire career. I wanted to get onto the business side of things. And I was actually talking to my dad and he said, you should go into sales. You'd be good at it. And I was like, what? I mean, Dad, come on. Like when I was a kid, my dad had introduced me to a friend of his, like when I was just a little kid. And I was painfully shy. My brother was the performer, and I know that you know that because he's a musician and all that stuff.
Yep, seen the videos.
My brother was the outgoing one, not me. And I remember my dad said, listen, all you have to do is shake his hand, look him in the eye, and say, good to meet you, and then you can go back and crawl under the table. Even though I wasn't that painfully shy at that stage. In terms of speaking in front of a group of people that I didn't know, even more scary is speaking in front of your peers or presenting in front of your peers. Yep. It just wasn't my thing. I'm good in small groups, but I've never been the kind of guy to run a room or feel comfortable like that. Some of our bosses have been at Bio-Techne. Some of my mentors have been like that. Never been comfortable in that. So I was sort of astounded when my dad said, you should try sales, you'd be good at it. And I was like, well, why do you think that? And he said, because you tell it like it is. You're no BS kind of person. And it would be a breath of fresh air because whether you're trying to buy a car, whether you're trying to buy a house, everybody is always in it for their end. And while you would obviously be in it for you, I can see that, you'd be looking to serving the customer and mainly telling them exactly like it is. This is the product. This is what it can do for you. And he thought I'd be good at it. So I took a shot and there was an opening. It was actually as kind of, at Bio-Techne, we had sales support people that helped the territory reps manage their territories on the inside. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like what I was hired into that role, even though we had 6 sales reps in Minneapolis, all based out of there, traveling into their territories. When one of them would be visiting their territory, traveling or whatever, I would take over their territory on the inside. So that's where I got my start in sales, kind of in a support role. And I kind of got my break when 2 of the reps were traveling at the same time and I was able to handle their entire workload. And so that kind of opened the eyes to management. And when there was an opening for the Northeast territory, Boston in particular, and so I had 7 states and 3 Canadian provinces, I was the guy. But one thing I really learned during that process, so I applied, I asked for the job initially for that support role. Well, when that job opened up for the Boston territory, I assumed my sales manager would just say, hey, I want to put you in this role. I was waiting for him to come to me. And after 2 days, he didn't. And the best lesson I ever learned in sales was from him because I knocked on his door and I basically was like, what the hell? Like, you have the open territory. I want it. And he was like, I was waiting for you to come ask for me for it. And he even said, like, you don't get anything without asking. So that was my real first lesson in sales is you got to ask for the business. And I'll always
awesome.
think.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dave Carlson.
There you go. Thanks, Dave. I know Dave very well too. Dave, great advice. Your dad, obviously a very wise man, and it seemed like you had a great relationship with your dad where you actually took his advice and stuff. And I can only hope to have that with my kids. I think what your dad also meant when he said, you tell it like it is because you would be the type of person that would tell the customer, well, no, my solution is not for you, and be honest about it, which is a huge thing when it goes a long way and develops loyalty and returning business and almost being like a consultant where they would come to you for even stuff that you don't even sell. And that's how you build trust, is telling that person like, no, this is actually not the best solution for you, go look elsewhere. So and realizing it's not about you, it's about them.
Definitely. And I have a great example of that. I don't want to jump too far forward, but when I was at Bio-Rad, I was selling clinical controls and point of care devices initially for them before I sold instrumentation automation. And I was at one of the Mayo facilities in southern Minnesota, and they needed a new point of care A1C device. And we had one, but it was a piece of crap. I was not going to sell that to them. And we had a new one coming out, but they would have had to wait 6 to 9 months for that release of that, a new point of care device. And they're like, no, we really, really need one. We'll take this in the short term. And I was just like, I'm doing you a favor by not selling. If you have to go in a different direction and I don't ever get your business for this, I'll feel better than if you buy this particular instrument. And they really appreciated it, and they did wait, and they bought it, and the whole system ended up making that purchase. So me sacrificing, I don't know, $1,000 in commission ended up making me a lot more money down the line. And also it was just the right thing to do.
And not only that, but more importantly, you gain a customer's respect. And,
yeah, absolutely. They'll always trust you. And that's the
exactly.
key, like you said, building trust, knowing that you're not going to sell them up the river. The biggest part of it too, and I told them in humor that I don't want to be coming back here every week because you're having problems with this thing.
Hmm.
And that's the thing, is like putting problem solving when your customers aren't happy with your product. That's where you really earn that trust beyond just not selling them something that they wouldn't want.
You mentioned you being a shy kid and being an introvert. Uh, to some people, shock as well. I'm an introvert as well. And having been through many sales meetings and many sales trainings and having led sales teams, I can now say they come in all different sizes and colors and shapes and forms. It's not about if you're introvert or extrovert. It's about if you understand what we just talked about, how to build relationships, how to gain trust, being truthful, telling it like it is, and understanding it's not about you, it's about them, and uncovering their needs. And if you have that sort of care and attention and focus, doesn't matter what you are.
I definitely
Obviously
also
learned that.
having great interest in the subject matter is key, and a grasp of it. If I felt like I had a good grasp of something, my initial presentations were probably awful compared to what I could give today. Of course,
Sure.
you refine your skills and everything, but that's definitely the truth.
Do you have a story related to that where you kind of had to get over the hump?
Yeah. My first sales trip was to Boston, and if
Okay.
anyone's worked out there, they're hard asses, and in a good way. Like, I always felt like not only some of the best business I conducted, but also I appreciated the fact that the customers weren't full of crap either. They were telling me exactly what they needed, and if they move forward with you, you better be able to deliver. It wasn't a wake up call because I was green, but it kind of set the tone for my career. I also learned to be a good negotiator early because of working with those folks. I recognized early, like, hey, it's just their job to try to get as much out of you as they possibly can, but it's also your job to give a little, but also have those hard lines, areas that you're not going to cross. Like, no, I value my product more than that.
Mhm.
So I did learn how to take it, so to
Yeah.
speak, as a salesperson, but I also learned how to stand on my 2 feet and be strong. And that really kind of shaped my career going forward as working in the Northeast.
Yeah, you definitely do develop a thicker skin for sure and learn not to take everything,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning of our careers. That's what we do, right? We take everything to heart.
Yeah.
Um, but once you get over that hump, you're able to focus and see clearly in the bigger picture, all that. In your opinion, Jeff, the role of a salesperson back then versus the role of a salesperson in 2025, what is the main difference?
Pressure. I think there's a lot more pressure to deliver the numbers. There's always been pressure to deliver. I mean, you always wanted to hit your territory number. The economy is different. It's a lot more cutthroat than it used to be. And the economy now, in terms of our business, is much more packed, tight. When I was younger, whether it was at Bio-Rad or Bio-Techne early in my career, the big players out there. And there were a couple smaller companies and startups and small biotechs that competed with us, but we were so well known and there were less options. Now there are many, many more options. There are a ton of different companies. We see them every day. We're the ones contacting these companies looking for partnerships with them. So I think overall the competition is tougher, and the pressure from your company, if you're working in corporate America, is tougher than it was back in the day. And again, it's not to say that there wasn't pressure. I mean, everybody wanted to hit their numbers and succeed, but I see it all the time. There's so much pressure to deliver, even without tools, all the tools you need and those sorts of things. So I think that's the biggest difference. As far as the role with the customer, I think it's exactly the same. A good salesperson always is a consultant. You're working with the customer, listening to what their needs are, and trying to create a solution for them to make their lives easier. And that was the same back then as it is now. The best sales reps have that attitude and that approach.
Absolutely. I think one of the big differences as well is, because of technology, you would think it'd be easier to reach out to customers and to build that relationship, that bond. But it's almost like it's harder to get in-person meetings at this point because customers are just so used to seeing you on the screen, and nothing, as you know, beats in person. And so you're missing a lot of that body language and the little intricacies of how a conversation happens. That's one thing I noticed as well.
Yeah, thank you, COVID, because that's what really did it. I mean, we did have video conferencing and all that kind of stuff, but the best business still is conducted in person on both sides. You get the measure of the person, for one thing, on both sides. And, to really generate trust, I still feel that handshakes are important. Also, from a sales standpoint, it is much harder to understand, there aren't as many tells on a video conference. If a customer is tuned out, it's harder to see that on a call. It's much harder to feel the vibe of the room, so to speak.
Call and like half the customers have their cameras off,
Yeah, that's right. It's unfortunate. Now, it has made us more efficient. We're able to have more meetings maybe. When I was at Bio-Rad, for instance, we had some metrics while I was in the field. We had to average 3 sales calls, in-person visits a day. However you arrange them, we were free to do all that. So when you think about it, nowadays, 2 or 3 calls doesn't seem like a lot. A lot of people have a lot more. But the value of the calls that I had with my customers was much higher in person than it ever has been on a conference call, unless you already know the person.
Typically, you would stay there much longer than like a video call or...
Yeah, and then you'd have the opportunity to meet other people while you're there. That's another thing. You're able to touch more bases while you're on campus, so to speak, in an institution. And then when you're sitting in a meeting, let's say you have a really good one with a couple people about whatever topic, they're like, hey, Dr. So-and-so or my colleague definitely would be interested in hearing what you have to say too. Let me introduce you to him. And so you go introduce yourself to the guy or a gal and set a meeting. Maybe, hey, I'll be in touch. I'll send you an email. And so I do think in-person networking is so much easier in person.
Absolutely. I find the art of the small talk as well is lost. And I think that's where you really build the relationship with customers, right? Those kind of conversations, walking from the door to their office or them asking you if you want a coffee and you say yes. So you walk to the cafeteria and the conversations you have in between the actual official meeting, that's where you get that bond, right? And you find out, hey, do they have kids? Oh, I have kids. Do they like dogs? I got a dog. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, now the only way if you have a pet is if your cat walks in front of the screen. Exactly. So I agree, and you do build friendships because the customers, particularly when I was really on the road a lot, they knew me, I knew them. You know them personally. If they had a loss in their family. I remember when my dad passed away, I had to reschedule some of my meetings, and it was therapeutic to go and meet with my customers that next week. I got hugs and, it was real bond. They were professional friendships. People care about you. And yeah, the small talk is lost. You don't talk about the NBA playoffs or the Wild playing tonight. Even when I presented Bioplex instrumentation at Marquette General in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it was a late afternoon presentation. And afterwards, the guy was like, "Are you staying in town?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just staying at the Hampton Inn." He was like, "Let's go grab some dinner and a beer."
For those days.
I mean, that is so, it's powerful because
Yeah.
then you just really get to know people. And
Yeah, that outing and
lost.
that supper, drinks, that's equivalent to like 10 official calls,
That's right.
So after your stint with Epinorth and Bio-Techne, you and I ended up working together again at North Star. And I got to tell you, I'm so grateful and so blessed to be working with you and to be doing what we do best. What we love to do is finding solution for customers at the end of the day and building that relationship and partnering. It's been really cool.
It's been eye-opening. I commend you, Pat, for taking the risk to start your own company. And I'm thankful to have joined after being laid off. It's a tough market, and I didn't want to go backwards in my career, but there's only so many senior director / VP positions out there, and they're hard to get. People work their entire career to get in that sort of role, and I didn't want to fall back. And no offense, but I didn't want to get back on the road again like I was before and hustle in that way. So I appreciate that you took that risk. And I also appreciate the fact that I was put in a position to take that risk myself because it has been eye-opening. You understand what it takes to really build a company from the ground up. I've worked at mid-size or large companies. And the one thing that I've learned at these companies is they're all inefficient in their own way. You have red tape that takes forever to get through. Even making a product change or a product insert change takes 6 months sometimes at companies. One thing about having your own company and a small company is that you're able to be much more nimble and maneuver quickly. Okay, this isn't working. Let's pivot and change today. We don't have to have 9 different managers sign off on things, even though that's the right answer. And it will end up being implemented. But a lot of times companies, because of the way they're structured, how large they are, it just takes too long to make changes. And in some cases, you end up losing revenue because of it. But yeah, I appreciate joining North Star. It's been a great ride thus far. I think we're building something pretty special.
Well, buckle up, buddy. We're just getting started. I know when I first started it about a year and a half ago, I always envisioned it wasn't going to be just about me. I want to build this thing with a team of like-minded folks that believe in the vision, that believe in the mission, but not only that, and is to have fun with them and get to know them and pretty much develop another family.
Yeah, definitely. And I think our team is at the partner level is varied in strengths. We all have our specific talents that we can exploit to not only help the customer, but ourselves as a business. And things are going well thus far. I'm excited to see the future. I think we do offer a really unique service to companies compared to that of like a traditional distributor that throws their product in a catalog with a bunch of other companies with like products.
That's the exciting part, is that we're creating something new in the industry. The need is there, and it's just a matter of adding value and following through with our promises.
Definitely.
All right, Jeff, to wrap things up, I just want to ask you one question. What advice would you give someone that's considering being part of the life science industry after school?
Don't be narrow-minded in your career choices. Whether it was going into college, coming out of college, or even being in the lab when I first started, I never envisioned myself being a sales guy, being a director or manager of salespeople, or really being in high-level business development. That just wasn't something that was in my thought process based on my personality, based on what I wanted to do initially. I had a set goal of this is kind of what I want to do. And I ended up doing something completely different to the point where I'm helping you run a company. And so I just made my career choices as opportunities presented themselves. And if you're not willing to kind of step outside yourself and take on challenges that you may not think really fit you exactly without going through that process, maybe it won't, but step outside yourself a little bit and do something that maybe you thought you might not enjoy because you might end up loving it.
Man, that is awesome. Awesome advice. And that not only fits someone just fresh out of school, but it fits someone that's been working at a job that they're kind of not satisfied with for years and need a push. So thank you, Jeff. I think we'll leave it on that high note.
It sounds good, man. Appreciate it, Pat.